The Emperor's Great Crusade relied heavily on physical conquest, but the 15th Legion, the Thousand Sons, operated differently. Led by their Primarch, Magnus the Red, they functioned as dedicated scholars. To them, the volatile, supernatural dimension known as the warp was a field of theoretical physics waiting to be mastered. They called this psychic dimension the Great Ocean. While the rest of the galaxy viewed the immaterium as a source of madness and demonic threat, the 15th Legion treated it as a navigable topology. By applying rigorous academic study, they believed they could tame its chaotic currents and harness its energy. This philosophy was physically realized on their homeworld, Prospero. They channeled raw psychic energy to power Tisca, the City of Light, a utopian metropolis of silver towers and underground hydroponics. Here, psychic mutation was embraced as an evolutionary tool to build a highly enlightened society. This reliance on the supernatural put the Legion at odds with the imperial truth, the Emperor's secular doctrine that denied the existence of gods or magic. By centering their culture on the warp, the Thousand Sons had built a society that contradicted the very foundation of the Great Crusade. This intellectual focus deeply unsettled the other imperial generals. Primarchs like Mortarion of the Death Guard and Leman Russ of the Space Wolves had built their cultures on a deep-seated hatred of witches. To them, any manifestation of psychic power was a form of deceit that had no place in a legitimate military campaign. This diagram illustrates the biological cost of the ex-Fifth Legion's methods, a flaw in their gene seed known as the flesh change. Their continuous interaction with the warp caused their very DNA to break down, unraveling and randomly mutating warriors into chaotic, asymmetrical monsters. As these horrific transformations became impossible to hide, rival commanders escalated their complaints to the highest levels. They formally demanded that the Thousand Sons be entirely disbanded and erased from imperial records. The tension between these opposing ideologies threatened the stability of the expeditionary fleets. To prevent a civil war among his generals, the Emperor halted the Great Crusade and convened a formal tribunal to settle the matter of psychic power. The Council of Nikaea took place inside a colossal stone amphitheater on an isolated frontier world. Tens of thousands of armored warriors and imperial officials sat in silent ranks under harsh overhead lights, with the Emperor himself presiding from a high dais as the supreme judge. The central charge of this tribunal was highly specific. It sought to determine the legality of a librarius, the official corps of sanctioned battle psychers integrated into the Space Marine legions, and to rule on the broader practice of sorcery. The prosecution argued that sorcery requires bargaining with the intelligent, malevolent entities that reside within the warp. They testified that because of the deceptive nature of these entities, anyone who attempts to harness their power will eventually succumb to their influence. The Council of Nikaea established the first legal boundary for humanity's interaction with the supernatural, creating a legal precedent that would govern the legions for centuries. Taking the floor in his own defense, Magnus argued that ignorance is humanity's true enemy. He stated that no knowledge is inherently dangerous if the scholar remains its master, and that embracing psychic evolution is the only way for the species to survive. Magnus highlighted a contradiction in the prosecution's logic. This map visualizes how the Imperium already relied entirely on sanctioned psychers, the astropaths and navigators, to maintain its interstellar communication and transit network. This flowchart illustrates the tribunal's glaring double standard. Magnus's accuser, Leman Russ, employed his own combat psychers, Rune Priests. Mechanically, both channeled the exact same energy, but Russ avoided prosecution by claiming his power was filtered through shamanistic traditions. The ruling at Nikaea prioritized these cultural biases over the mechanical reality of psychic power, favoring the primitive rituals of the Space Wolves while criminalizing the structured research of the Thousand Sons. The Emperor ultimately rejected Magnus's defense. In his decree absolute, he issued an unequivocal ban on the Space Marine Librarius. All combat psychers were ordered to return to standard battle line duties, and the pursuit of sorcery was outlawed entirely. The Emperor delivered a final warning directly to Magnus. He ordered his son to cease all magical studies immediately, stating that if Magnus treated with the warp again, he would face the destruction of his legion and have his name struck from imperial records. To enforce this strict intellectual compliance, the Edict of Nicaea created the rank of the Space Marine Chaplain. These officers were tasked with policing the thoughts of their brothers and ensuring absolute adherence to the emperor's ruling. The Edict of Nicaea removed the tools needed to recognize and counter warp-based corruption, leaving the legions vulnerable as the forces of chaos began to move against the Imperium. By forcing Magnus into isolation, the emperor had set the stage for the destruction